Okay, welcome to this tutorial on Blender 3D. My name is JEMcg, and I will be your 3D art tutor. And just kind of get you up to speed so that for any subsequent videos I might create, hint hint, or if you want to find other videos, other tutorials, you got a good foothold on how to get started. Alright, let's open Blender here. I'm using version 2.78, and this is sort of a little splash screen that opens up every time unless you turn it off in the settings, which I'll show you how to do. And you kind of see what your previous files that you've worked on are right here, and you'll probably have none if this is your first time opening the software or whatnot. But you can just click anywhere and it goes away. Okay, so just to start, we'll go over the interface. I want to turn on my start. There we go. Now you can see all the keys I'm using. So here is your main 3D viewport. This is where you're going to spend most of your time looking. And up top here we have the menu bar. This is the toolbar, and it's contextual, so depending on what you're doing in the 3D viewport, this will change. And probably for as far as my videos for a while, this is really the only thing you might need is this menu, and basically we're going to be adding primitives and things like that. Right, and you can also turn it off if you want a little more view with the T key and turn it back on. Next, let's go on to the properties menu, which you can add to the viewport with the N key. And this is also contextual, so this will change depending on what you're doing as well, but for the most part this stays the same. And it's got all kinds of menus, but we will sort of get into that as we go. And hit N to get rid of it. Okay, so let's see. Down here you also have the animation timeline, which we don't really need for this tutorial or anything, but and finally we have, this is sort of different, more properties like the scene properties, object properties, all kinds of stuff like that. This is like everything in here is what you have in your scene. So you can select, this is a lamp, you can select that there, your default cube, camera. So these are all objects in the scene, and you can, if you ever get lost, like you zoom way far out and like you have no idea where you are, you can go, oh well, I want to focus in on the cube, and then period, and look, you're zoomed right back in. So if you ever get lost, that is a good way to get back to what you're working on. Okay, so let's work on viewport navigation. So as you've seen me turning the cube around here, or I guess turning the camera around the cube, use the middle mouse button. As you can see in the little, right over here, it shows, kind of highlights the middle mouse button clicking when I click it. And that is how you can turn the camera around your object, whatever you have selected. Or I suppose whatever's the camera's focusing on, which happens to be the cube at the moment. And you can use Shift middle mouse to pan around the view, like so. And it doesn't show that, the thing, oh well. So Shift middle mouse allows you to pan, and then to zoom in and out, you have the scroll wheel on your mouse. Rotate, and there we go. It is recommended that you use a full keyboard with a numpad and a 3-button mouse for Blender. It makes everything easier. But if you don't have that, like you're working on a laptop or something, you can go up to the File menu up here, User Preferences, Interface, or no, Input, and you can emulate a 3-button mouse by clicking this. So for example, if you don't have the middle mouse button, you would just hit Alt and left click to simulate what the middle mouse button would do, which would be rotating the camera. And you can also emulate your numpad, so the keys, the 1 through 0 keys atop the letters on your keyboard will work like the number pad keys. So I have a full keyboard, I don't need these, but if you need it, that is how you can use that. Okay, so now let's focus in on this cube and moving it around. So there's a couple of different ways. You see these arrows here, the blue, red, and green. They stand for the axes that you can move the object on. So you can see down here you've got blue is the z-axis, and that is up and down. Y is the green, and that's going to go this direction. I guess Y is to and fro, so back and forth, and then the x-axis is going to be left and right. But you can just grab these and move them up and down, and then it'll lock the movement to that specific axis. You can see the sort of line that it creates so that the object is moving on that line like a rail, like so. Right? But there's also shortcuts. Like I personally never use that. I actually turned it off right here down. You can just say select that and turn it on and off. And I just turned it off. And then you can just use the G key and it'll grab or move the object around in space. And then you can left click. Okay, so let's get into editing this cube. So right now we are in object mode. So we can scale it, we can rotate it, we can move it, but we can't really change it meaningfully. So down here you can see object mode. We can change that to edit mode, like so. And now we have all kinds of things we can do. You can also use the tab key to go in between these modes. Or just click down here. And you'll see there's lots of other modes down here, but in later videos I'll get into that. Okay, so we're in edit mode, and we have three different ways exactly to work with this cube. We've got edges, vertices, and faces. So it's pretty self-explanatory. So we got the vertices are these points at all the corners. If you select two vertices, you've got an edge. Or we can just go to the edge mode here and just select edges only. And if you select 4 edges with shift right click, now we have a face. Or we just go to face mode and right click and select faces. Okay, so you can also move, rotate, and scale these things. Just like in object mode, you can globally rotate, scale, and move. You can granularly, like for each specific piece you're selecting. So let's rotate this face. Ooh, doesn't look good. If you right click, it'll undo that. Or we could scale the face up and down like so. That looks good. And you can hit the G key to move it as well. And you can do that with all these things, like just go over to edge mode, select an edge, and scale that down, and we can move it. And we can rotate it, like so. Okay, now another really useful tool, and this is basically, I'm going to get into the basics of box modeling right now. So let's select a face and hit extrude, or the E key, which will extrude out that edge and create a new section with a bunch more faces. And it's kind of an interesting shape. Alright, but you can also select an edge, and let's extrude that as well. Left click to confirm that. Select this edge, extrude with the E key, And there we go. Now we got these two faces basically that we just sort of pulled out of that edge. And we can, let's try to clean this up a little. Okay, so another really useful thing when you're editing is I showed you earlier that I don't use this, and this has a very nice kind of control where it locks to a specific axis, and so you know exactly where it's going. Like the G key will kind of just move it around willy-nilly in space, but these give you a very nice like rail to move the object or selection on. That is doable with the G key though. So let's turn these back off. Hit G, and so I was moving on the x-axis, so we hit X, and now we've got that nice controlled movement. Alright, let's actually go G and move along the y-axis a little bit back, like that. Okay, so another thing you can do, like, see we've got these just kind of random faces sticking out here. They don't really complete a shape. So first, we're going to want to complete it, but let's delete this face here. Just go into face mode, so we don't need that face. And you can hit the delete key, or hit the X key, and then it'll give you the selection, and obviously we want to delete the face. Alright, and now let's select, let's go into edge mode and select these two faces, shifts, right click, and then hit the F key, and that will fill that hole basically. And we can continue, shift select, fill, do that here. There we go. Now we have a complete shape with no holes in it. It's a very weird one, but there it is. And finally, the most important, well, I guess the second most important tool in box modeling is adding edge loops. And we do that by going Control R and hovering over an edge. You see we get this red line, and we'll left click, and it gives you kind of like control over where you want it. You just hit right click if you want it perfectly centered, or R, if you want to put it over here, you just left click where you want it. So this is an edge loop, and it's just a continuous edge that goes all the way around your object. These are edge loops. This is an edge loop. This is technically not an edge loop because it has a star here, but we won't get into those technicalities right now. Alright, and you can add any number of these. And now that I have this edge selected, I can sort of scale it up. And basically just, it gives you more geometry in the mesh you've box modeled to sort of add more detail, and it kind of looks like a weird camera now. Very weird camera. Alright, so finally I want to go over the number pad and why it's really awesome to have. Though you can emulate the keys above the letters to do the same thing, but anyway. So we have this sort of interesting shape. If we hit the 1 key, it'll go to the front of this object. The 3 key will go to the right side, and the 7 is going to go to the top, and 9 will go to the opposite of whatever you just selected. So if we hit 1 and then 9, it's going to go front to back. 3, which is the right, we hit 9, it goes to the left. You can alternatively go 1 to go to the front, or Control 1 to go to the back, and that works for all the letters. But if you want some more granular rotation of the camera, you've got the 2, 4, 6, and 8 keys. So kind of just get this very incremental rotation, which can be very useful at times. And finally, we have the 5 key. So right now, you're sort of seeing the object that I created in perspective. If we hit 5, it goes into orthographic mode, which is really useful if you want to model something very accurately, because you don't get the distortion from perspective. Perspective is great when you want to look at it and how it would look in, say, a game engine or in an animated short film. It's going to be in perspective, so you kind of want to see how it looks that way. But for modeling purposes, it's actually quite nice to be in orthographic mode, just to get some more accurate lack of perspective, I guess. Okay, and that about does it. Oh, there's one more thing I want to show, and that, let's go back into object mode, hit the X key, delete this. You can create new objects this way over in the toolbar here. You can also go Shift A, which is basically add, and then you have all these different things, basically all the exact same tools over here, but it's just a shortcut. You can go Mesh, Cube. There we go. Let's delete that, and let's go Shift A, add a mesh, monkey. And let me introduce you to Suzanne, who is the mascot for Blender. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what I'm doing here, hit that like button. If you want to see more, subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you. Take care.